The day began like a bright coin tossed into the sky, warm and sharp, carrying the bold energy that seemed to follow Apollo wherever he went. The god of the sun moved across the slopes of Mount Parnassus with the confidence of someone who had never once doubted his place in the world. He walked as if the ground itself should feel honored to be touched by his feet. Birds followed him, not because he commanded them, but because joy trailed behind him like a golden ribbon. He was young, radiant, and full of a pride that came from centuries of winning every contest he bothered to join. Apollo knew he could bend music until it sang for him alone. He knew his arrows flew straighter than any mortal or immortal could match. And he certainly knew that no one, not even the mischievous arrows, should be challenging him. The trouble began with a thoughtless remark, one of those careless little insults that roll off the tongue before reason steps in. Apollo, fresh from a victory over a monstrous serpent, had been enjoying the applause of nymphs and gods when he caught sight of Eros testing his tiny bow. The sight amused him, a child, he thought, pretending to play with weapons meant for warriors. "You there," Apollo called, waving his hand lazily as if summoning a passing breeze. "Leave archery to those who understand it. A bow is not a toy for small hands." Eros paused. His golden curls shook slightly as he turned his head. His eyes, usually bright with mischief, narrowed with something more serious. "You think you are the master of every art, Apollo?" The god shrugged. "Where accuracy is concerned, yes." It was foolish, Apollo later realized, to underestimate a being whose power shaped the hearts of gods and mortals alike. But in that moment, basking in admiration and victory, Apollo saw only a child. He did not see the spark of vengeance beginning to burn. Eros lifted 2 arrows, each glowing in its own color. One gleamed gold, bright and warm. The other shone with the cool, pale shimmer of moonlight. "Then let us see," he said quietly, "how well you handle the consequences of your pride." Before Apollo could react, the golden arrow left Eros's bow with a hum that seemed to slice the air itself. It struck Apollo in the chest, sinking into him not as pain, but as sudden, overwhelming longing, so powerful that his breath fled him. The second arrow, pale and cold as winter water, flashed into the forest below. It disappeared into the trees, where a young nymph walked alone, her steps quiet as sunlight on leaves. Her name was Daphne. She belonged to the valleys and groves of the river god Peneus, known for her devotion to nature and her independence that glowed brighter than any jewel. She was not a nymph who dreamed of lovers or poems or whispered promises. Daphne felt complete in her running, in the quiet breath of the woods around her, in the rivers that sang beside her feet. And in that moment, she paused, her hand brushing a tree trunk as a strange coolness flowed into her heart, a sudden stillness, a gentle shield. She was touched by the second arrow, the arrow of rejection, crafted to repel love itself. Apollo knew none of this yet. He staggered back, stunned by the force of passion that filled him like a storm at sea. He pressed a hand to his chest, trying to steady himself. He had felt desire before, admiration, delight, but nothing like this, nothing that shook him to his core and left his thoughts tangled and longing for someone he had not yet seen. He turned toward the forest, sensing her presence as surely as he sensed the sun's path. Something there called to him. The world seemed to tilt, the air shimmered, leaves rustled as if whispering her name into his ears. Daphne. He took one step forward, then another, drawn by a force he could not resist. He did not yet know who she was. He did not know what fate had already shaped around them. But he felt deep within that glowing wound that his life had just changed. And somewhere beneath the branches, Daphne felt the wind shift as if something vast and dangerous had begun moving toward her. She shivered, unaware that the first threads of a story older than memory had already wrapped themselves around her life, pulling her to a destiny she had never asked for.
The sun rested patiently above the treetops as Apollo approached the forest where Daphne wandered. His usual confidence was buried under a restless energy that made his steps quick and uneven. He was a god who could cross mountains in moments, yet now he moved like someone afraid of breaking a fragile dream. Every sound from the trees made him turn. Every flicker of light made him wonder if it was her. Daphne, however, remained blissfully unaware of the pull drawing Apollo toward her. She stood beside a small stream that curled through the forest like a ribbon of silver. Her hands skimmed the water's surface, breaking it into ripples that danced across her reflection. She breathed in deeply, feeling the cool scent of pine and river moss, the scents that brought her comfort and peace. The world around her loved her. Birds hopped near her feet. A doe approached without fear. The water sang louder whenever she touched it. Even the wind softened in her presence, as if careful not to disturb her calm. She carried a quiet strength, a gentle refusal to be anything other than who she chose to be. When Apollo first saw her, he stopped breathing. She stood in a patch of sunlight, her figure framed by golden leaves. Her hair fell around her shoulders like dark silk. Her posture was graceful, steady, unself-conscious. She did not try to be beautiful, and somehow that made her even more so. The arrow inside him flared with sudden light, and longing poured through him like fire. He stepped forward. Branches crackled beneath his feet. Daphne's head snapped toward the sound. She saw him, tall, bright, impossibly radiant, like sunlight given shape. His hair glowed like molten gold. His eyes held a warmth that seemed to reach across the space between them. But before she could fully process what she saw, her chest tightened. The coolness from Eros's arrow, the instinct to avoid attachment, surged. She felt herself drawing inward, a barrier rising around her heart like a protective wall. Apollo lifted a hand slowly, as if afraid she might vanish. "Do not be afraid," he said, voice soft and sincere. "I didn't mean to startle you." Daphne took one step back. He noticed, and his heart twisted. I only wished to know your name," he said gently. His tone was kind, his smile tentative, but the intensity in his eyes overwhelmed her. She felt not danger exactly, but the suffocating pressure of being singled out by someone who carried the full force of the sun within him. "I am Daphne," she said cautiously, "but my name is not something you need." The words surprised even her. They came out sharper than she intended, but the sensation in her chest pushed her to keep distance, to protect herself from something she did not understand. Apollo moved one step forward. Daphne moved one step back. Their dance began. "I have seen beauty, but never like this. You are more than anything I have ever known." Daphne's breath caught. She shook her head. "Please do not speak like that." "I cannot help it," he whispered. The longing inside him pressed harder. It guided his voice, his gestures, every breath. He wanted to be near her. He wanted to learn her laugh, her thoughts, the patterns of her days. He wanted the right to stand beside her, not as a god, but as someone who cherished her. But Daphne felt none of this. Her heart was shielded by the silver arrow's touch, turning every warm word into a warning. "I am not someone to be pursued," she said firmly. "I belong to the forests, not to romance, not to admiration. I choose a life of freedom." He swallowed. "Then let me walk with you, nothing more." She shook her head again. "No." The simplicity of the word pierced him deeper than any blade. She looked at him with steady resolve, not anger, not fear, just certainty. He reached out a hand, not touching her, only extending it slightly. "At least allow me to speak with you again." Daphne's voice was gentle but unwavering. "You must leave." Apollo froze. The sun dimmed behind a cloud as though reacting to the quiet heartbreak echoing through him. He lowered his hand slowly. "If I leave now, will you ever allow me to return?" Her silence was answer enough. Apollo stepped back, but every fiber of his being resisted the motion. His heart burned with longing he could not ignore. Leaving her felt like walking away from the only truth he had ever discovered. Daphne watched him, her expression softening slightly. She did not want to hurt him. She simply wanted her life to remain her own. Apollo, retreating into the shadows of the forest, felt the fire within him grow instead of fade. Their story was only beginning. The days that followed became a strange dance of closeness and distance. Apollo tried to respect Daphne's wish for solitude, yet his heart pulled him toward her with a strength he could not resist. He watched her from afar, not as a hunter stalking prey, but as someone helplessly drawn to the warmth of a flame, even as it burned his fingers. Every time Daphne ran along the river banks or through the groves, Apollo found himself moving in the same direction. He tried to keep his distance. He tried not to frighten her, but longing moved him like an invisible tide. Daphne, meanwhile, grew more uneasy with each passing day. She could feel Apollo's presence like heat on her back. She could sense the way the air changed whenever he approached. It was not threat she feared. It was the intensity of being wanted so deeply. It pressed on her like sunlight too strong to bear. One afternoon, after hours of running through the woods to calm her restless thoughts, Daphne approached her father, the river god Peneus. His voice flowed through the water around her, warm and steady. "You are troubled, my daughter. Your footsteps carry worry." She knelt beside the river. "Father, a god follows me. He speaks softly, but his presence overwhelms me. I feel trapped in a fate I did not choose." Aeneas's waters stilled in concern. "Apollo?" She nodded. "He means no harm," her father said gently. "That is not enough," she replied. "I do not want a life tied to him or anyone. I want the freedom of the forests. I want to run without feeling someone's shadow behind me. I want my choice to remain mine." Her voice trembled slightly at the end. Peneus felt her distress ripple through his waters. "What would you have me do?" She hesitated. "If he comes closer again, help me, please." Peneus did not answer, but the river hummed softly, as if promising protection. Not long after, Apollo emerged through the trees, unable to stay away any longer. His steps were hesitant, but his longing drove him forward. "Daphne," he called gently. She froze. He stepped toward her with a mix of hope and desperation. "I mean no harm. I only wish to speak. Please." Daphne backed away. "I have told you already. I do not want this." Apollo's voice cracked like a branch under weight. "I do not know how to stop feeling this. I did not choose it." "Neither did I." The air tightened between them, filled with everything neither could control.
Apollo reached out his hand again. "Just wait. Let me explain." But Daphne's instincts surged. The forest behind her whispered escape. Her heart beat faster. Branches flashed past her. Leaves blurred. The forest seemed to part for her as she fled. Apollo reacted without thinking. "Daphne!" he called, bursting forward. He ran with the speed of a god, but Daphne was swifter than any mortal. She moved with the grace of someone born from the forest itself. Her feet barely touched the earth, but even so she could feel Apollo closing the distance, his footsteps like thunder behind her. "Please," he shouted, "do not run from me." But she ran faster. Tears pricked her eyes, not from fear of him, but from the fear of losing her freedom. She did not want to be captured by destiny, by emotion, by anyone's desire. The river came into view. Her father's voice echoed faintly through the rushing water. Behind her, Apollo pushed himself harder, the golden arrow's magic blazing inside him. He could hear her breath, fragile and quick. He could see her hair streaming behind her like a dark banner. Daphne reached the edge of the riverbank and cried out, "Father, help me!" The wind dropped. The forest fell silent. The river surged as if answering. Apollo reached out his hand, fingertips brushing her back. "Daphne, please!" But before he could catch her, her body changed. Her heartbeat slowed. Her skin cooled. Her fingers stretched into slender branches. Her feet fused with the soil. Her hair shimmered, merging into leaves that rustled with a sound like distant sighs. Apollo froze in horror. Her voice, faint and fading, whispered, "I choose my freedom." Her body transformed fully into a laurel tree, tall and graceful, leaves shining like green flame. Apollo fell to his knees before her. The forest seemed to weep. Apollo knelt at the base of the new tree, his chest rising and falling with uneven breaths. Daphne stood before him, no longer flesh and movement, but bark and leaves, still as a breath held too long. Yet something of her remained, her spirit, her resolve, the soft echo of her presence. His trembling fingers touched the rough bark. "Daphne," he whispered, "what have I done?" He felt no anger at her choice, only sorrow, a deep, aching grief that pressed into his ribs until he felt hollow. He leaned his forehead against the trunk. "I never wanted to trap you. I wanted to love you. But I pushed too hard. I let my longing become your fear." The leaves above him rustled, as if acknowledging his words. Apollo felt tears gather in his eyes. Gods rarely cried, but longing and loss had shaped him into something more human than divine in that moment. "I cannot undo your choice," he said softly, "and I will not try. But let me honor you." His voice trembled, but his resolve grew steady. "You refuse to be claimed, so I will not claim you. But I will remember you. I will keep your spirit alive." He rose slowly. With gentle reverence, he placed his hand on the tree again. "You will be sacred," he said, "not as a symbol of victory, but as a symbol of your strength and your freedom." The air shimmered with quiet warmth as he spoke. "I will wear leaves from your branches, not to show possession, but to show devotion to the memory of the one I loved but could not touch." He lifted a single branch, its leaves glowing faintly. With a soft breath, he shaped them into a crown, not a crown of triumph, but of mourning and respect. He placed the crown on his head, the leaves whispering faintly. Let every poet remember your name. Let every musician sing of your grace. Let the world understand that love should never force itself. The forest stirred around him, as if approving this quiet vow. He took one step back, gazing up at the laurel tree. I will not ask you for anything more. But if ever your leaves move without wind, I will believe it is you. For a moment, the branches shivered. Apollo closed his eyes, letting the sound wrap around him like a final farewell. Then he turned and walked away. The forest watched him go, sunlight glinting on the laurel crown. Birds began singing again, their songs gentle, respectful. Daphne stood in her new form, her spirit calm. She was free, not in the way she once imagined, but in a way that still protected her heart. She remained rooted, yet strong, a reminder of a love she never wanted and a strength she never lost. Apollo visited her tree often, always in silence, always with respect. He never asked her to return to flesh, never begged for more. He simply stood by her, letting his presence be soft instead of overwhelming, gentle instead of consuming. Over time, people came to associate the laurel with honor, excellence, and achievement, not because it belonged to Apollo, but because it belonged to Daphne first. Her spirit of independence became a symbol for all who sought their own path. And Apollo, the god who once mocked a bow too lightly, learned humility from a love that could never be returned. Their story became one of longing and restraint, of desire and freedom, of the price of pride and the strength of self-choice. A story carved in bark and sunlight. A story whispered each time laurel leaves tremble in the breeze.